right, Johnny Wallace. So the boys have been on my case for a while about doing a podcast. So sitting down with people around the school just to find out their thoughts around the school and experiences and stories. So what a great way to start our first ever TSS podcast with the legend that is Johnny Wallace. So I guess my first question is, after 37 years of teaching and teaching boys in the latter part of your career here at TSS, what have you learnt?
Well, the first thing is sometimes I've always been a little bit sceptical of the word legend, because most of the legends that I've always sort of known about in history are dead, and there are legends after they've died. But no, what I've learnt about teaching and about probably myself in the 37 years I've been here is that even at this time now, I'm still the same guy that started all those years ago. I'm no different. My hair's just a bit grey, I'm just a bit slower, I don't swim as fast, but my principles, my values are just the same. And as far as the boys at TSS are concerned, I can still remember when I first came here in 85 and I met Johnny Clifford, who was the school captain of Delprat. I met Charlie Starkey, he was the captain of McKinley House. I met Pagey, who was the captain of Delprat. And the boys today are no different. The boys are the same, and I can still remember those firm handshakes, look in the eye, how you going, sir? I'll never forget that. And that's what's endeared me to the school, is that the boys of this school really appreciate the staff who give them that bit of time and a bit of extra time, and it's just it's so worthwhile. And I've just learned about myself is that even now there's still a hell of a lot I don't know. And I love that. I love the thought of that, because education to me is infinite.
Absolutely, yeah, very good point. You only know what you know when you're a school kid, but
right.
As you go through life and experience. So I guess let's call you a living legend then, Johnny. I'll call you the living legend. Okay. Where did it all start? Where'd you grow up?
Well, I suppose this will be interesting for a lot of the boys who I've taught. When I started, I'm a Tasmanian. I was actually educated, if I could go to, in my primary school in a town called Devonport, which is the northwest coast of Tassie. It's where the ferry goes from Melbourne and drops off people and goes back again each day. I went to a state school. I never ever went to a school like this, and I think that's one of the reasons when I actually taught here, I realised how much I really appreciated the fact that I'm in a school like this. Because when I was a kid, like when I finished grade 10, I really didn't know what I wanted to be. There was no incentive to really advance myself educationally. Nearly every boy and girl I went to school with went into a trade as soon as school finished. And it actually was my dad, my dear dad. He actually, at the end of year 10, he told me to go and work in his firm, which he worked for in a mechanical firm. He was an automotive fitter. And when I was working there, he said, look, you're on a good salary, mate. You're on 25 cents an hour. Be appreciative. I looked at him, I said, oh, thanks, Dad. And one day we were in the office there, and he said, look, you'll be working here next year. He said, if you want to get a good job, you're going to have to go and further your education. And my mum and dad were very, very special. I tell you why, because in our home, we always had a library. They always kept putting books and books in front of me to read, and I did. I read them. And as you know, Tasmania can be damn cold in winter. So I was indoors a lot, so I read a lot. I used to read a lot. I used to love reading, both fiction and non-fiction. But I remember one day I was working with Dad, and he was there, and I got my pay for the week, 40 hours, $10, all in 50-cent coins to make the envelope look heavier. I'll never forget that. And then Dad said to me, look, mate, you see that girl there working in the office behind the typewriter? Look, mate, she'll probably be your wife one day. And I said, geez, Dad, well, if you don't get out there and get an education, mate, and advance yourself, that you will be. And so after that, I went to matriculation, and it was called Matric then, boys. Years ago, it used to be called Matric, because these days it's sort of senior, but we used to be called matriculation. Now it's 11 and 12. And then I went to Matric, and I really upped the game, and I just really worked, and I really did well academically. And as my mum always said to me, mate, you've got it. It's the first time you started to show it. And I actually got the geography prize in year 12. I got the ancient history, modern history prizes, and I got a scholarship to university, which is the University of Tasmania. And thankfully for me too, then the government actually was very generous at that time. And as they all came from the Menzies era, who was a previous Prime Minister, which was free education. And he said, and they had scholarships. And if you did really well in year 12, lots of kids got scholarships. And not only did you get a scholarship, if your parents were not very well off and couldn't afford to send you away, you got a living away from home allowance. So I went to Hobart and did 5 years of university, and my parents didn't have to pay a cent, all because I won that scholarship. And thank for that, because it wouldn't have, if they hadn't had that scholarship, I would have never had the opportunity. So when I went to university in Tassie, I loved it, did really, really well. I did really, really well. And initially I was going to be a town planner, but I decided against it because they said to me, you're going to be stuck in an office all day analysing stats. And I thought, oh, God, I like to get out and move. So I actually went and did a postgraduate teaching degree, and actually primary school teaching, because I've always had the belief that I wanted to be able to teach from 1 to 12. So that gave me the opportunity, because I knew afterwards I could always go into more senior classes. So I actually started off doing primary teaching, and before I actually started, I actually won the Walter White Memorial Prize for Education in my final teaching preparation year. And I remember I'd been to Japan and back on a cruise ship. I'd done Paul Hogan impersonations, got a free trip to Japan and back with the old Elizabethan Theatre. And when I got back, my dear mum was there at the airport. She said, "Oh, Johnny, you won this prize. You got the prize." And I said, "God, Mum, how much is it?" And she said, "Oh, $12.50. That's what the prize was. And I said, "Oh, great." And so I taught in Tassie for 2 years in the west coast of Tasmania at a place called Southreport River, which was an iron ore mining town. And that was 2 of the best years of my life. I remember the first classroom I went into in 1975. There was 52 kids in the class. 52. And I'll tell you now, boys, and I'll tell you what, I also taught children of all abilities, and I even had 2 handicapped girls in the class, because in those days they didn't have special schools. So I had 2 handicapped girls in the class who were very severely retarded. And they used to be in the class all day. They couldn't do much. They're beautiful girls. And it was just a real eye-opener for me as a young guy in my early 20s, dealing with all those. But it was a great experience. I taught there for 2 years, and unfortunately in my second year, teaching in Tassie, I got bronchial pneumonia, really, really sick. I went from about 73 kilos in weight down to about 64. I lost a lot of weight. And the doctor just said to me, "Mate, get out of this state. It's too cold for you. Go somewhere warm." And so I had to actually resign, which was really sad, but my health was a priority. And so what I did then, I actually said to Mum and Dad, "Look, Mum and Dad, I'm going to go and just drive around Australia for 12 months and get my bearings." And Mum and Dad even got me a new Belmont Holden, nice big blue car it was a beauty. I said, "Thanks, Dad." And so they put me on the ferry in January, and I went across to Melbourne. And this is what I did. I tossed a coin. I said heads, Brisbane, Queensland, and tails, Western Australia. So I tossed the coin, and bang, within half an hour I was on the way to Nullarbor Plain to Perth. I went over there, and I thought I was going to have a real cruisy time. And then I was there for a week in the youth hostel, and I just got the Western Australian newspaper, and there were two ads for jobs. And I said, "Oh, I might just have a go at this." One of them was a Montessori school, and the other one was Christchurch Grammar School, which was in Perth. And it was a job only 1 term. The headmaster was on long service leave. So I applied for both, and believe it or not, the interview was on the same morning. So I went up to this Montessori school, which was very, very casual, and there were kids interviewing me and everything, and it was really, really strange. And I said, I would love you to work here. You're a young guy, and this sort of thing. You love sports, and this is what we need. Then I went to Christchurch Grammar School. I had never been inside a private school ever before for this interview, and I still remember walking into that school, and these magnificent trophy cabinets, and this wonderful man came out called Peter Moyes. Peter Moyes was the headmaster of Christchurch Grammar School. Came out and met me, and took me in and interviewed me, and it was one of the best interviews of my life. And he said to me, "I've never heard of Savage River. Is that a school?" I said, "Yeah, it's where I taught." And he said, "You know what, I've even researched it, and you're fair dinkum, it is a mining town. I thought it might be a bit of a fakey CV." I said, "No, I taught there." And so I got the job there. I was only there for a term because the headmaster came back from leave. And then I went to Scotch College in Perth. Mr. Moyes said, "You've done a great job here for a term, John. I've got a job for you over the road with Bill Dickinson, who's the headmaster of Scotch." So I went over there and taught there for 7 years. Great school and fantastic school. And there I got my love of surf lifesaving, athletics. I used to do marathon runs, half marathon runs and these things. And then when I was at Scotch College for about 7 years, there was an ad. I went to the Australian surf lifesaving titles in Queensland in '84. And I said, geez, this Gold Coast is a great place. Great place. And look, I still had no idea where TSS was. And so I was over there for the surf lifesaving titles. And then when I went back later in the term, there was an ad in the Australian newspaper for Scotch College for a year 6 teacher, year 4 or 6 teacher. And so I just applied, said I'll give it a go, and bang. Peter Rogers, who was the headmaster of the prep school, was at a conference at Aquinas College in Perth, and he said, I'll interview you there, and he interviewed me there. I got the job, and I drove across the Nullarbor again, this time into Datsun Stanza. The Belmont Holman had well and truly done its day, so I drove over here, and I've been at TSS for 37 years and loved the place.
Amazing, Johnny. You brushed over a couple of really important points. We'll get to a few of them, but first one is, on that bookshelf, you've got the best memory out of anyone I know. You can name any Melbourne Cup winner, jockey, length. What's the best book you ever read on that shelf when you were growing up?
Look, it's a fiction book. It's a fiction book. The best book I've ever read, the book that I just loved, was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. When I read that book, I was in love with literature. I was in love with the Caribbean. I was in love with language, words. That is such a beautiful book. And I only found out many years later, that Ernest Hemingway was quite a controversial character, and he had quite a sad life, really. But also that in 1952 he won the Nobel Prize for Literature for that book. That is the most beautiful book. And I think that book taught me something, and it's something that's been a part of my life big time, is simplicity, is the best way about anything, to go things as simply as possible. Because when you read that book, it's in many ways, it is simple, but it's just beautiful with it, and it's just a great book.
Love it. I love the passion you talk about it as well. So a couple of beautiful schools you mentioned there, Christchurch Grammar and Scotch, obviously where you met Mr. Wayne, our former headmaster.
Yes.
But Aquinas actually has really similar architecture to TSS. In fact, one of our boarding houses is almost identical blueprint to one of the Aquinas. But it's the story that always sticks in my mind. You and I went to might be the Cottesloe or the North Cottesloe Surf Club. There was that piece of paper framed on the wall with you and Prince Charles out in the water. So you've got to tell us I was going to say, who's the most famous person you've ever met? I know the answer, so tell everyone about the Prince Charles story.
In your life, you have these unexpected moments, don't you, that spring on you. And that was one. I was club captain actually at Northcott. And North Cottesloe, and over there I was very lucky because in my club captaincy they gave me a room in the surf club, which was overlooking the Indian Ocean. And I had so many fond memories at that club. I have so many fond memories. And it was actually 1983, it was 2 years after Charles and Diana were married, they came out to Australia. And William was actually a baby. William was only a baby. It was in April. I still remember the month. And I was in the club rooms on a Sunday afternoon having my dinner, watching the sun go down. And the club president, a guy called Graham Russell, was a lovely man. He came in and he said, John, look, could you do me a favour? I said, yes, Graham, anything. You give me free accommodation here, mate, everything. I'll do anything for you. And he said, could you make sure you go down tonight and scrub the showers out really clean? Okay? I want to be spotless, okay? And I said, that's the first time you've ever asked me to do that. He said, yeah, well, tomorrow something pretty special's going to happen. And I said, really, what? He said, the health inspector's coming. He said, no. He said, look, I'll tell you now. He said, Prince Charles and Lady Diana are coming down here in the morning at 8 o'clock. And Prince Charles is going to go for a swim, and I'd like you to escort him with his bodyguards. And I just sat there and I said, really? He said, yeah, what? He said, now what do I need to do? He said, well, in the morning when you get up about 6 o'clock, he He said, just make sure things are tidy in the clubhouse because he's going to have breakfast up there as well afterwards. The girls are putting on some breakfast. But could you also please make sure you only wear your club togs, your blue and your white striped club togs. We've already told him about you because he knows who you are before he even gets here, and he wants to. It's one of his conditions he has when he goes. He likes to research what he does. And I said, okay. And so the next morning, I still thought, oh, look, he might have something else on. And it would have been, it was really early in the morning. It was about 6 o'clock. It was 6 o'clock. It was 6 o'clock, about 20 to 6. There was a knock on the door. And this big guy was there. I said, geez, who are you? He said, I'm one of the bodyguards. Can we please use your room as a lookout? And I understand your name's John and you're going to be taking Prince Charles for a swim. I said, okay. So I went out there about 6 o'clock, and I'm not joking, because I was teaching at 8 o'clock I'd be at school at 8 o'clock at Scotch. So 6 o'clock was perfect for me to do this. And I was out there in my togs. I felt naked. I was only there in a pair of club togs waiting with the club president and his wife. And sure enough, at about 5 minutes to 6, these 4 little BMWs came over the hill from North Cottesloe down past the OBH Hotel, and they came into the surf club. The first one was full of bodyguards. They got out quickly and scattered. The second one had his personal assistant and people there, all dressed up in sort of suits and very neat and tidy. And sure enough, in the next one there was Charles. Prince Charles was in the next car. Diana didn't want to go for a swim because there were cameras everywhere. It was like cicadas clicking on the dunes. So she, of course, didn't want to go in the water. She looked absolutely radiant and beautiful. And he got out and he's wearing a pair of green fluorescent shorts and a red spray jacket. And when he got out of the car, I was quite shocked. I actually thought he was bigger than what he was. And he was actually not very tall at all. And he had his well-pronounced bald patch in the middle of his head. But he was so jovial. And he said, I love to swim. I love the beach. I was here a few years ago and they invited me out for a barbecue. And he said, I'm so thankful for you for taking me for a swim. I thought, God. And so the North Cottesloe Surf Club is actually private property. It's one of the very few surf clubs which is private property. So we could actually keep all the hundreds of people away from the boundary of the club. And that's one of the reasons why I think he loved to come there. So we went down the beach and he had his bodyguards everywhere and I was with him. I had some great conversations with him too. He wanted to go for a run first. So we went for a run up north and we're going for a run and we're having a chat and he was talking. He knew things about me I never thought he would. So this guy, he knows me, where I teach and everything. And we got up, there's a beach north of North Cottesloe called Swanbourne. And Swanbourne's a nudie beach. It's actually a nudie beach. So as we were getting towards the nudie beach, I actually said to Prince Charles, look, how far do you want to go? Do you want to turn around now? He said, no, let's keep going. Look, I said, look, we have a rule in the surf club that if we actually go into the next beach called Swanbourne, unfortunately, it's a nudist beach, so we drop our togs and we put them back again when we come back. And he said, let's turn around quickly. He said, no one will be seeing the crown jewels. so he went back. We went back towards Cottesloe, North Cottesloe, and this guy had great sense of humour. That's why I have never, ever, ever believed what the media write about the Royals, because a lot of it is absolute rubbish. We went back and then we went in the water. I taught him how to body surf. He was hopeless. He thought he was good. And we had a swim out there, had a chat and everything. Went back, had some breakfast and off he went. Now, boys and ladies and gentlemen who listen to the podcast, something really amazing happened the next day. Because when I finished taking him for a swim, it's something I learnt about life in respecting people and values, etc. When I took him for a swim, I went back into he'd left about 7:15. He's so grateful. Left at 7:15. He had a busy itinerary that day. When I went back and it was all like a dream to me. I thought, wow, I've been with Prince Charles. Wow. I said, God, I can't believe this. It's my head shaking, And I had my shower, got ready for school, and when I went outside, there were 4 TV cameras in my face. I'm not joking. They were just there, right in my dial. And they all were prying for me information about Charles and when he was in the chain. Really, really, pretty low sort of stuff about they wanted to find. I said, excuse me, I said I had a wonderful swim with the Prince. It was a great experience, and that is all I have to say. And thank you very much for waiting around for me. And I went to school. Funny thing is, when I went to school that day at Scotch College, the headmaster called us in for a meeting at morning tea and said, "Staff, today we are very privileged that we are going to walk down to the main road, which is Stirling Highway, and we're going to stand on the side of the road and wave to the Prince Charles when he drives past in his car." I thought, here's me, it's been with a swim with this guy, and wave there with, and of course everyone was excited. And I didn't say much. Of course, all that night, because when I was on the TV camera, they knew that what I'd done that morning. But this is what got me. The next morning at 6 o'clock, there was a knock on my door in the surf club. A knock on my door. And who was at the door? It was Prince Charles. By himself. He came down, he knocked on the door and he said, "John, I want to go for another swim." And I nearly brought tears to my eyes. And he said, this is what he said to me. He said, "I want to respect you. I respect you because what you did not tell things that I talked about. I really appreciate that. I wanted you to know that." He said, even Diana said to me, "That young man who took you for a swim, he didn't say anything." He said, "No." He said, so he came back for a swim and he had he was just in one vehicle because there was no one there because the itinerary had publicised the fact that he was going down to Mandurah, which is a town south of Perth. And when we were in the water that day, he asked me to help him prepare a speech for there. And I told him about a speech. I said, why don't you go and talk about how important teachers are in the community and society, and that how for the kids at that school, make sure you respect your teachers and all that sort of thing. And that was the content of his speech that day. And I tell you what, I'll never forget that. The fact that he came back and he knocked on the door himself. I said, wow, that just made my day.
I absolutely love that story, and we'll finish this first section now, so that's into part A. We'll have a quick break and we'll be back for part B in a moment.
Incredible.
Welcome back to our podcast with the living legend of Johnny Wallace. So I've been fortunate enough to sit, and when he humbly says he lived at the North Cottesloe Surf Club, the restaurant's now the room that Mr. Wallace lived in, and some view, I tell you. But that article I was telling about, and we just had a quick conversation, was about the angle that the media took a photo. So it was Mr. Wallace and Prince Charles in the water, but there was a girl about 10 or 15 metres away. And the media had portrayed it to make it look like Prince Charles was actually swimming with the lady. And when you were talking about that article, it really upset you because it just really didn't portray exactly what had happened. So I thought I'd let you elaborate on that for a minute.
Yeah, what happened was, in the second day, when I was having a swim with Prince Charles, there was a girl on the beach who was actually the wife of one of the guys in the club. And she was after publicity. She was after publicity and really, really upset her husband as well. And so when Charles was there the second day, we were walking out of the water, and she actually thrust herself in front of him and said, "Oh, Charles, you remember me? Remember the barbecue a few years ago? Remember me? My name's Leslie," and all this sort of thing. And he just sort of looked and he just sort of said, "Oh, look, I forget." And he actually just moved. I was with him, which is sort of primary source information. And when I went over to the OBH, and he left. He sort of said thank you. I gave him a pair of little togs for his son, for William, because William was only about 6 months then. So I got a little pair of baby Speedos for his son and gave it to him when he left. And that was it. To me, it was like, well, this is just a part of my life. Fantastic. And now life moves on to something else. And when I went into the OBH for a drink that evening, I used to have a counter tea or two over there. Is this TV came up and it had the fact about Charles's former girlfriend, and here's this media angle. And then I looked at they have a newspaper there of an afternoon, like the Daily News, and there was this photo of her in the water with him, and she wasn't even there. Like, they'd gone and actually sprayed and done a totally fictitious story about supposed former lover. It was really, 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 really upset me enormously. I said, what do these people have to go through in their lives? And I said to myself, wow, he would have brushed it aside because he cops it all the time. But I thought to myself, And the girl who did it, she was after like centerfolds in magazines and things like that. And it was so sad, and it made me realise, and I sort of thought to myself that that was when I said, I'm not going to believe everything I read. Really in my head, I said, when you have celebrities and people who are famous or whatever it may be, a lot of it's just absolute rubbish, just to get media attention. A lot of them just want their own private life to get on with what they're doing and to do the role that they have. And it was so sad, but it ruined it actually. But I never let the moment ruin me. That dissolved her marriage and everything. So really, the long term of it, she had young children and all. It's so stupid to have done it.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that story and how upset you were, and that's probably the first time I just realised how true to your moral compass you are, and it really did get to you. And your values, a man of the importance of values, particularly the values we try to instill in young men, but I think the value you've brought to this school, and for those that are listening that have not had any exposure to speech and variety, it's a pretty informal meeting, I suppose, but it gives boys an opportunity to stand up and speak in front of people. So, Johnny, where did that sense of importance of speaking publicly and speaking comfortably and being comfortable with silence when you speak, and the importance of monotone and speaking with actual feeling and emotion, how was that instilled in you, and then how have you portrayed that 453 times in meetings with boys?
Look, as far as I'm concerned at TSS, that public speaking club I've had, which now is called Speech Variety. Look, it's been called Toastmasters, Junior Toastmasters in the past. It's had various names, but Speech and Variety is the best one. When I was a kid, I was bullied really badly. I was really bullied. I had a terrible stutter. My mum used to really worry. And the reason is I was bullied. I was a little kid. I didn't really grow till I was about 16. And I used to get bullied all the time, and I was always stuttering and I couldn't speak. I remember when I was a Boy Scout once, we used to do Bob a Job. And we used to go and knock on people's doors, and we'd ask them for a job, and they'd give us a shilling or 10 cents. We changed to decimal currency. I remember this day I went to the door and I couldn't speak, and the lady just looked at me, and I thought, I just couldn't get it out, and it really shattered me. And as I grew up, I joined Toastmasters as a young man, and my speaking just improved enormously. And I learned about the power of silence. I learned about the power of listening. I learned about the power of enunciation. All of those things I learned. Not to say when I speak. I learned those things. I conditioned my brain to be able to deal with that. And I said to myself when I came here to TSS, and I was at Toastmasters, I was in the Southreport Toastmasters Club, I said, I'm going to do this at school, TSS. And I did it in the prep school to start with, of course. And it was very informal then. It was mainly done on a classroom basis. And every few weeks we'd have a meeting, and the kids loved it. And I can still remember, and I know that Andrew will know a lot of these names, I can still remember guys like Stuart Morris, Charlie Tomlinson, Warwick Tomlinson, I remember Adam Birtles, Nathan Sharp. They used to love it when we had those impromptu speaking sessions. They used to love it. And I thought to myself, wow, it's great. I wish when I was their age someone did this for me. That's what I said. I wish when I was their age someone gave me this opportunity, because the thing that I've always said is paramount in TSS Speech Variety is confidence. Confidence is the key when you speak, because a lot of people are terrified of speaking. And there's a wonderful man on the Gold Coast who was a dad. And again, Andrew would know his son, Adam Lacey. Peter Lacey. Peter Lacey was a mate of mine, and he was probably Australia's one of the greatest ever surf lifesavers. And I became a mate of his on the Gold Coast, and he used to come to the Southport Surf Club and used to do runs on a Sunday morning. We'd do swim runs, we'd do beach runs, we'd go up to the spit and back. And he was a lovely guy. I really liked him. And Adam was only a little fella when I first met him. In fact, he was in grade 1 when I started in 85. He was in grade 1. I met this beautiful man, Peter Lacey, and his lovely wife, Anne Lacey, and they became friends of mine because I was very heavily involved in swimming in my first 20 years here, huge. And Peter Lacey said to me, he said, "Oh, you're in Southport Toastmasters, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, Pete." I said, "Come along." He said, "Oh, it's one of my greatest fears." And yet he was one of the principals of Sunland, and he said, "No, public speaking's not my forte." I said, "Come along, Peter." And he did. He came along with me, and we went to the meeting, and I introduced him to everyone, and they said, "Oh, Peter, can you do an icebreaker for us?" Which means your first speech. Just tell us something about yourself. And I was with Peter, and Peter got up and he said, "You know what?" he said, "You know what I feel like right now? This is how I feel. If you told me now to swim from the Gold Coast to Auckland to New Zealand in rough water and sharks, I'd rather do it than get up and speak." And there is great truth now that the greatest fear of the human race is not spiders, sharks, death. It's actually speaking in front of an audience. That is the greatest fear people have. And I knew that with the boys of this school, that if I could implement that skill, that I would be setting a lot of those boys up for life. And it's not OP, it's not an OP, it's not an ATAR score. And all of those meetings, so over the course of 37 years, I've had over 450 meetings, all of an evening. I've had assistance from parents and staff. My successor is Miss Jess Prowden, who will do a great job, and I will support her. Even though I won't be here on a regular basis, I'll support her. And over that time, I have seen young men who are petrified of speaking, by year 12 are very competent speakers. This year, for example, we've got our very first John Wallace Courage Trophy in public speaking, and it was given to a boy called Gus Bryant in McKinley House. When I first met Gus, and he came along one night to a meeting, he said, "Oh, this is the first and the last, Mr. Wallace. I can't do it." Mate, he's plugged on those 5 years, and now he can stand up and give a talk. I said that to me, that's what it's all about. Of course, we've had our brilliant speakers, Avishek Gangasandras, and the likes of boys like Charlie Block, beautiful speaker, his brother Harry, and his brother James, great public speakers. We've had heaps over the years. Andrew Bowdovich, the names just come up all the time. But that Speech Variety Club, to me, is very, very special. The fact that give boys the confidence. And there's a lady here on the staff who had 2 boys in Speech Variety. Her name's Mrs. Katrina Martin. They got 2 boys, Jack and Charlie, who were great public speakers, very competent. One day, Jack, when he finished here, said had to do a Skype interview to the US with lots of people on the other end firing questions at him. And he was there for about 40 to 50 minutes. And as soon as it finished, they were very, very appreciative and very gratifying of what he had to say, and he was set. They were very happy with the communication, and he just got and said to his mum, "Thank God for Speech Variety," straight to her face. And I thought, well, that's all you need to tell me. Been a great club. I've actually I did a number count the other day. I've given all my records, because boys sign up every night to archives here. I've given her a lot of the books of the boys who are in attendance, etc., at the meetings over the years, and there's been about 2,500 boys who've experienced speech and variety in their time at TSS, and I think most of them would say great. And I received a lovely email from one of the boys who never did it. His name was, when I came here in 85, it's actually Andy Hobart's dad, David. David sent me an email the other day, and he said, "Look, congratulations on 453 meetings, mate. Unbelievable." And he just said, "That is something I didn't do and should have done." And the other one was Daniel Trellope. Daniel Trellope said to me, he said, "That is one activity." He's an old boy here. He still works in the school. He had an accident. He's in a wheelchair. Great guy. He's an old boy, works in the school, a little boy. But he actually got an email. "I wish that is one activity I should have done." And I never forced boys to speak. You only speak when you're ready to speak. And I'll give the example of Freddie Dora, school captain in 2014. Freddie came to his first meeting in 2013 and he was terrified of public speaking when he was in year 11. And I wouldn't be surprised then if he was being earmarked then to be a school leader. He's a great kid. He's under 16 rugby captain, but he's just a really good bloke, Freddie. He's a bit like a lot of the top boys and teachers and the people I know in the school. They don't change, they're themselves the whole time. They don't try and be anyone else. And Freddie was like that. And he came to the meeting and he's sitting next to a year 7 boy. There was big Freddie and the year 7 boy. He's sitting there. And that's the great thing about speech variety too, because all the boys are equal. From your school captain, year 12s, right down to year 7 boys. They all sit together, they mix, and no one's special. We're all the same. The variable here we have is our speaking. And Freddie was sitting there and I didn't say to him, do you want to speak? Because I knew that he didn't. And this little year 7 kid got up and talked. And Freddie just sat there with his mouth open. You could see it. And at supper, we always have a lovely supper at the end of the meetings, which is important for camaraderie. It's very important to have supper. And everyone sits and has a talk, and the school captain can talk to boys in grades 7 and 8. Other boys will pop in from the boarding house and have a chat. It's just beautiful. And Freddie just said to me, he said, "Oh, Mr. Wallace, that year 7 kid was good. My God, he was good, wasn't he?" And I said, "Yeah, Freddie, he is, isn't he?" He said, "Mate." And Freddie didn't speak for about 6 meetings. He came to everyone, he didn't speak. And then he got up and spoke. And he actually said to me, he said, "Oh, how did I go?" I said, "Freddie, you were great, mate. You said something." And it was a great feeling, because that to me is what it's all about. It's the ones who struggle, who are afraid, who have reservations, who meet the challenge, and they fight the challenge and they win the challenge. And when they leave speech variety, you can just tell. Mohit Talani, who was here in 2006, who was a round square freak, great guy. He used to come to speech variety, and when he got up in the assemblies, he said to me, "I have so much confidence." He'd always get up and say, round square, round square. And I said, well, that's what it is. Exert your personality and your individuality. That's what it's about. Great club. And to me, that's really, if I think the legacy that I've given this school is that club and what it's given to the young men of it.
Yeah, you've offered us a lot more than just speech and variety, but it's a pretty special part of the school. So we have to keep stopping after every 15 minutes. We're getting one story at a time, but we're going to keep with speech variety in a moment and talk about confidence when we come back. Okay, we just talked a little bit about confidence, and I think if there's anything speech and variety does, it's worked on the kids' confidence. I think it's Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, has a great quote around confidence. It's confidence is like cash. You've got to have some to make some, but no one wants to give you any. And you'd never told me that story about bullying, and often the boys getting bullied lack confidence, so they're an easy target. What's your message to those boys that find those easy targets and the bullies out there? Yeah,
Bullies have been around for a long time. They're going to always be around. And you're a fool if you say to yourself that you're going to always stop it, because it's not part of it. Unfortunately, it's a part of the human nature of some people, is to be dominant, because that's what a bully wants to be. When I was a kid at school, I'll tell you something here that'll really get you thinking. When I was a boy at school and I arrived at a new school when I was a kid, young boy in high school, I arrived at school and these boys came up and said to me, "Oh, do you want to come out and have a kick of the football?" And of course, when you're new in a place, I'd gone from Launceston, where I used to live, to Devonport, and there's a group of guys there and they said, "Oh, look, come and have a kick of the football," when I was a new boy on the block. And I went along, and of course, no, I wasn't going along to have a kick of the football. What they did is they got me into the oval where no teachers were or no one, and they got a big ring around me, and they just started thumping me and bashing me. Just hitting me. Each have a turn off, this, and I couldn't run away. I couldn't get away. I just had to take the blows. And of course, I was badly bruised and beaten. And I got up and I went back into class. I didn't run home, even though I was really upset. I'll be honest, I was crying. I'd cried, and I sort of thought, wow, I just couldn't believe that. I could not believe that anyone could do that to anyone. And they didn't even know who I am. And they've done that. And this is with bullies. A lot of bullies don't even know who they're doing it to. They just do it because it's a part of them, their nature. They've got to be tough or dominant, and really they're not. They've been the opposite. And all I'm going to say about bullying is this, that I think the worst thing you can do if you're being bullied is run away from it and trying to blame everyone. Bullies, of course, deserve to be punished. There's no doubt about that. But you've got to become more resilient, and that's what I did. I became more resilient. So what I did with the boys who were bullying me, I actually made a huge effort to sort of recognise them, to say, look, my name's Johnny Wallace, I'm proud of who I am, and don't do that again, okay? You don't have to hit me. We've got to be at school here together, we've got to live together, we've got to survive together. And so what I did was, I became very resilient. I learned who my friends were. I learned the difference between a friend and an acquaintance. I think a lot of people have the wrong terminology for what a friend is. A lot of people acquaintances, but they're not friends. In your life, you really only have a few friends. You don't have a lot of real friends. Friends are people who are going to be there when it's tough, and they're going to be there to pick you up and hold on to you. They're going to be there to comfort you, to talk to you. Acquaintance is someone you meet, and you meet a lot of acquaintances in your life. They're not friends. A lot of people say, I've got 500, like on Facebook, says you've got 780 friends. No, most of them are acquaintances. And what I learned about was the difference between being a friend and what a friend is and an acquaintance is. And as far as the bullying is concerned, I abhor it. I abhor bullying, but you've got to just get a bit of strength. You've got to get resilient. You've got to be resilient. And people the structures around you that protect you, that is the schools, the hierarchy, etc., they've got to also develop a structure where they are instructing students and parents that it's not acceptable. And that's all they can do, really. Because a lot of these bullies will show their ugly face in the most unexpected places when no one's around. And it's very sad. And I think bullying is going to be something it's something that's really hard to put your finger on, because it keeps coming up all the time. Like people say to me at TSS, there's a lot of... I said, no, I hardly see any bullying in this school. I really mean that. And yet people say to me, 1 in 4 boys are being bullied. So I wonder what is the actual definition of bullying? I really struggle with it, particularly, but I learnt my way was... And when I developed my public speaking, and I was a really good speaker, I used to win lots of comps and things like that. By God, people sit up and listen to you and watch you. Okay, I really mean that. And they say, wow, and you learn the respect of each other. I think if you tend to hide and put your head in the ground like an ostrich, you're going to continue to be bullied. So you've got to get your head out and say, I am here, I am who I am. I am proud of who I am. I love me. I love myself. That's it. You've got to love yourself, who you are. I'm proud of me, the way I look. I don't care what you think. I love me. And that's important. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people sort of become extremely negative, and they hide, and they get totally absorbed in their social media and dealing. It's not the way. The way to do it is to face it. That's the way to do it, is to face it. And if you're being bullied, as I said, the person bullying you is weaker than you are. Remember that, and they're very easy to counter. And when you walk up to someone and you say, like I did, I'm proud of who I am. My name is Johnny Wallace. I'm proud of who I am. Okay, I want you to know that. But geez, they stand back. If they think you're an easy target, they'll keep giving you a hard time.
That's good advice, Johnny, and you certainly know who you are, that's for sure. Speaking of acquaintances and friends, we've got a lot in common through our life at TSS. We've come across a lot of people, and you've instilled a lot of confidence in people. You mentioned a lot of names before: Warwick Thomason, Charlie Thomason, Stewie Morris, the Craig Hobarts, the Nathan Sharps, Adam Lacey's. Very successful people now, and part of that success is coming along and meeting people along the journey, and you and I share the fact that we've got pretty special wives, and the people we met. Talk us about Rosie. How'd you meet her? Where'd you meet her?
Rosie, my beautiful, lovely wife. We've been together now nearly 30 years. I met Rosie here through actually a TSS acquaintance, Mrs. Chris Randall. She used to work in the office in the music, and also she was the PA, the personal assistant to Mr. Southreport when he was the Dean of Students here in the 90s. And I was a single guy on the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is a wonderful place to meet people, etc. And I had a lovely life in my single years. I won't go there, of course. We don't get there because I'm sure you don't want to hear that. And I used to love running too. I used to do half marathons. I did the Gold Coast half marathon from 1986 to about 1998. I did the half marathon. I used to love it. It was a 21 kilometre. I never did the full marathon because I just didn't train that excessively hard to do that. But I used to like to be competitive too. I used to like to run around at 1 hour 30 for the half marathon. I think in my times were about 1 hour 33 to about 1 hour 50 when I finished doing them. When I got a young family and I had other greater commitments. But I met Rosie through Chris Randall. Rosie was a Kiwi. She's a New Zealand girl. And she came over to the Gold Coast in about 1990. Her mum was already here, and her brother and her sister. And her youngest sibling was about nearly 15 to 20 years older than her. Her mum had her when she was only about in her 40s. So I met Rose, and Chris introduced her to me during the half marathon. I was with another guy, another icon on the Gold Coast who was also because I was club captain of Southreport Surf Club for a couple of years, was Jeff Vandergraaf. And Jeff was the club captain at Surfers. He gave great service to that club, Jeff Vandergraaf. So I got to know, and they introduced me to Rosie, Chris, and he was there, and I met her, and the rest is history. And we got married very, very soon after we met. I married her in 1994. I met her in 92. And I used to have a little cottage in Mudgeeraba. I used to live in a block of land, an acre and a quarter in Wurrungree, near the Tallow-Wurrungree border. And then Katie was born about 9 months after we were married, and then Sophie a couple of years later. And the great thing with Rosie, when I went into boarding here in Biddle in 2002, Rosie actually got a few jobs around the desks here in the office. And a guy called Trevor Wood, who was a prep school headmaster at the time, he actually asked her would she mind helping doing learning support in the prep school. And so she's been there ever since. And Rosemary really loves the prep school. She loves the teachers she works with. She loves the leadership of Terry Lee Hurd, who she works with, and all the girls, Holly Nixons and all the others she's worked with. She really loves the prep school. And she's also developed a great love there for the rainforest. She operates a rainforest there where kids go and play. But she's loved the school. And as Rosie would say, I got into TSS because my husband worked here. And we've been together for 30 years, and we live at Royal Pines now. We left the acreage because my wife said, I never see you on the weekends. You're always out cutting grass and doing jobs. So we moved there, and it's a lovely spot to live. But Rosie, much younger than me, and she continues to, of course, enjoy working in the prep school.
She's an amazing human being. So you two girls, Johnny, you should be very proud of that. Something that's always struck me, I've known you a long time, is just your intelligence and your ability to retain information. I'll put you on the spot. You met Rosie in 1990. Who won the Melbourne Cup in 1990?
Oh, yeah, okay. And this is unrehearsed, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
It is, no, haven't.
In 1990, the Melbourne Cup was won by a horse called Kingston Rule. Kingston Rule was ridden by a jockey called Darren Beedman, who was one of the premier jockeys in Sydney at the time. And Kingston Rule won the Melbourne Cup in 3 minutes, 16.9 seconds, which was a record. And that record actually was only passed last year by Twilight Payment, that won the 2020 Melbourne Cup. And the second horse was my favourite comic, was the Phantom. The Phantom was a New Zealand horse. It got second, and it ran a great race also, but Kingston Rule won easily. And but that was the winner of the Melbourne Cup that year.
That is unbelievable, because the next question was going to be what was the margin and who came second, and you answered it. You knew it was coming. That was completely unrehearsed. You might also know a horse. I only heard this on a podcast the other day. Simon O'Donnell, the former cricketer, a very good VFL player himself, he owned a horse, and it's the only time ever that second place, they have a little GPS in the saddle or the saddle cloth, and the second place, which was his horse, actually went through faster. It's just that the horse that won was a longer horse. So technically his horse won the Melbourne Cup. And
yeah, well, that was Natsky.
There you go. I knew you'd even know.
Yeah, and that was beaten by a nose by a horse called Empire Rose.
Empire Rose, there you go.
Empire Rose was about Empire Rose. This was his 1980. This was the actually 19 I think it was about the 89. Was it 89? No, sorry, it was the 1988 Melbourne Cup.
Sounds more like
it. Was the Empire Rose.
Yeah.
And it was ridden by a little Kiwi jockey called TK Allen. He was only a kid. And Empire Rose was a huge mare. She was about 18 hands. She was massive. And actually, if you ever see the finish of that race, Empire Rose actually took the lead from about the 600-metre mark and was never passed, right to the finish. And Natski was right at the back and had to come through the field. And the jockey of that day was a guy called Mick Dittman. And Mick Dittman's son went to TSS, Luke Dittman. And I remember meeting Luke when he was a boy in the school here. And I tell him that story, and his father had a couple of checks to get through the field, and he got into the clear with about 200 to go, and Empire Rose was still a couple of lengths in front. And when they got to the finish line, actually Mick Dittman was in front of TK Allen, the other jockey, but his horse still lost because she was so big. She was a big mare and she won by a nose. And Mick Dittman even said, I went to the camera and said, I don't believe this, I couldn't have got beaten. I was about half a metre in front of the other jockey. No, she was a big horse, Mick, sorry.
I think even Mick might have put his arm in the air, put his whip in the air. I think he thought he'd won it. So we're getting close to our 15-minute cut-off, so we'll end part 3 and we'll come back for part 4.
No.
All right, so for this next bit, I'm going to try to get through this, but it's a story I'll never forget of Johnny Wallace. We share a lot of experiences, but both Biddlehouse Masters, and sadly during our time, you live in these communities long enough, you share the really good times, and unfortunately you share the low times, like a small country town, I guess, where everyone knows everyone. And we both had times where we've lost a boarder in our house. And I'll never forget this, Johnny, and I'm always indebted to you for... I'll never forget Zach's dad was a plane flight from Qatar away. And so he turned up about 10 o'clock the next day, and I was standing outside Biddle on my own, and Johnny Wallace walked around the corner, and I've never, ever forgot it. And you shook my hand, and you said, there's no way you're doing this on your own. And I'm so grateful for that. So once I stopped being a sook, I think that one of the parts I wanted to get out of this podcast was you're just so positive all the time. And so how do I draw that out? How do we get a message to the boys when things aren't going so well? What's your advice? What's your message? And more importantly, how do you look after you, and how do you remain so strong and true to who you are?
Yeah, I know. I remember that day, Andy, really well. And I knew what you were going through, mate, because in 2008, I lost Nick Pete. Nick was a grade 12 boy. Zach was a younger student. He was in grade 10?
Year 10.
Year 10. I had Zach for history. Yeah. I remember curriculum history, and I got the shock of my life when I heard the news. And also the young boy at Pertons, who was just showed great leadership in the house for you. Because I knew his mum too well. I knew. So Greg also said to me, Greg Wayne, can just go down and be with Andy for the day. Just go around with him, mate. He's finding it pretty tough. And that beautiful lady too, Teresa.
Oh, amazing.
Teresa Manwaring. Beautiful lady. She was a matron. So that's why I was there, and I knew all you wanted me was to be around, just to be there. I wasn't going to go and be given any lectures and all this and this. I said, no, I'm just going to be there, and I'm here if you wanted to chat. And you were dealing with your own little demons that day you were going through. But I remember when Nick Pete, because when you experienced what you did, the school had a better hold on how to deal with it. When it happened to me, it was for Greg Wayne, and that was just all new experience. And I was at rugby. I was at rugby on a Saturday, and I'd been with the 16s. I'm the manager of the 16s, and I went home during a break because I got my 2 little girls, Katie and Sophie, and Rosie. So I used to go to Biddle House there and just go up there, and the phone went at midday. And a guy called Andrew Cinnamon, who was a Biddle House captain the previous year, just come up for the day to watch the rugby. And I've been chatting to him, and then it was Nick Pete's sister said, Nick hanged himself. And I just my knees started to shake, and because we knew he'd really had a lot of demons he was dealing with. But the very sad thing for Nick, he had a beautiful mother, Janice. She was lovely, such a great mum. And she used to bring him up from Ballina every weekend. He was a weekly boarder. And Nick was actually in the World Junior Sailing Championships only a couple of weeks later. He used to go, Janice used to pick him up on a Friday night, take him home, and he'd go to Sydney he used to train. I think that one of the guys who was his crewman actually won a gold medal since with Dan Belcher. He was a magnificent sailor, and he was the favourite to win the gold medal in Copenhagen. He was the favourite. Him and his crew member were favourite to win the gold, and they were only a few weeks away. So this kid had a lot to look forward to. So much to look forward to. And so I thought, no, this will shake him. But in the Easter prior to that, he'd had a breakdown in the house, and I had Alan Parsons came down one night, and he tried to go on down the river. He had his coat full of rocks. He was going to jump in the river. We knew there was problems. So they took him away, and he was in hospital for a couple of weeks over the Easter. And he came back again, and that's 2 weeks, and he was gone. And I just felt for his mum, and just sort of, just the feelings. And how did I deal with it? Well, I was shattered. And I remember when we used to have Biddle barbecues, every week we'd have a Biddle barbecue in the morning. I'd just get up early and put the barbecue on, and the boys used to help. I remember he came up to me one day and he said, this was before he passed, and he said, can I do anything to help you? And I said, no, Nick, everything's under control. And I really regret saying that. I should have said, no, mate, get the tongs out and help me. And I said, no, I realised later, mate, don't try and do too much when you're a housemaster. Pull back a bit. And he was probably just wanted that bit more time to having a chat with me, and that really hit me. And it caused a few little nightmares after that, I can tell you. And how I dealt with it, though, is that evening when Nick passed, it wasn't at school like you had to experience, Andy. This was actually at his mum's home. He was a weekly boarder. But Father Brian Gadd got all the boarders after the rugby and had a chat to them. I remember Kate Waring and Rosie were there with their hands around some of the little, like even little Isaac Fines Louisia, who now plays rugby. He's a giant of a man now. Then he was a little boy. He was a little kid. He was only in year 8. He was a tiny little kid. And he was all the year 8s were shattered. It showed you the strength of the house, because a week later the boys won the cross country, and they won it for Nick. And they won the Shield. They won the Shield that year. And Cal McGilvray was the captain. And he said, we've got a lot to go for this year. And that really brought the house together as a unit. It was amazing, that grief. But Greg Wayne was a friend of ours, for Greg's and I, was over from Perth. His name's John. And he was with his wife, his name's Heather, and they were over here, and Greg said, come out for dinner to our place that night. We went up there, and another guy who also John knew was Cameron Herbert. He was a housemaster here. So up that, and that helped me. That helped me get through it, having people from who I knew. And Greg, you didn't get lots of invitation to Greg's house for a meal. That wasn't his way, but just amazing. It actually was on that night that John was there, and John wanted to see me because I knew him at Scotch College. He was at Scotch College when I was there, and he wanted to see me, and he wanted to see Cam Herbert as well. And so Greg invited us up, and we were all together, and it helped for me to get through that night. And the really amazing thing is, too, it just shows you how things happen. But John who was there, you might remember that MH370 that went down, the one that went over, or it might have been MH17 that went down over the Ukraine. Well, John, he lost his dad and his 3 nephews and nieces on that plane. That one when went down, was shot down by that missile. I'll never forget that, and I thought went right back to that night. But how I've dealt with it is this. How I deal with things like that is, the first thing is this. Is never ever think that things like that don't happen, because they do. Even though you don't want it to happen, they do happen. How you deal with this, have loved ones around you. It's very important to have those who you love around you. If you know someone who's experienced grief like Andy and I did, don't hide from them. I found that when Nick died, some people didn't come near me. I couldn't understand why. I think it was because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. I said, go there, be there, take some food, or offer to make a coffee, or have a chat about, like Andrew would say, let's talk about the 1983 Melbourne Cup. Let's get my mind off it. Okay?
Don't leave that person in the cold. That's crucial. And the other thing too is, when that happens, make sure you comfort the loved ones of theirs too. I remember Janice came with the grandparents on the Monday, and Greg and Alan came down as well, their head and the deputy with myself. And we got in, went and cleared his room. It's very important to be there. And the other thing to do is how to deal with it is, when you're a boy, your mates become really important. And that happened in Biddle on 2 occasions. I never forget when Nick died. A week later we had the cross country, and all the boys in the house wore a black armband for Nick. That's what's special about this school. That made me so proud. And we went to the funeral in Ballon together as a group. And I wrote a little poem for Nick that was in one of the daily notices. I'll never forget that. Only 4 lines that just explained him. And I think it went something like this: Nick, you're sailing true, your boat is in the blue, and night will never forget you. Like that. That's what it was. The wind is blowing in your face, cooling your face, that sort of thing. I remember that poem very much, and I'm so glad I wrote it. And one of the boys actually got up at the service and recited it too. So the way you deal with that sort of thing is, you've got to become part of it, not hide it. And remember that it's a journey of life. That's how I looked at it. And that's my attitude also, boys and folks, is that it's a part of our lives. And unfortunately, in the modern world, it's a lot of it. And it's really during this COVID, who'd know the horrific things that have happened. But you deal with it, and you've got to understand that TSS, it's going to happen here just like anywhere else. And like Andrew that day, you would have grown a mile, you would have grown a foot. I know for you it was a very emotional day, and I know for me it was too. And thankfully, in the 6 years between you and I, Greg had started to work out platforms and how to deal with this. Because I remember in 2007 too, we had the bus crash. You might remember, when the guy ran his car into the bus.
Coming back from dance classes.
Class. I remember that, dealing even with that. And thankfully, no one was hurt. But you got to have. See, when you this to me is TSS. This is why I know this school's been a great part of my life, is because it's the totality of life. It's the laughs, it's the joy, but it's also the sadness as well. And it's all part of that. And when we're a community, and we belong to a community, we've got to share each other to get through it. We've got to do that. And we've got to ride the waves. It's no good there sitting back and say, geez, I'm lucky, it's never happened to me. That's the wrong way to be. You've got to not be like that. You've got to understand that it can happen to anyone. And to be around people and to be there holding their hand, just like when you read the texts in the Bible, like greater love hath no man, the man who lays down his life for a friend. Those sort of things are crucial.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. Thanks for talking about it, because I think that's what men don't do well, is have the conversation. And as I said at the very start, albeit through a few tears, that the awkwardness around what you feel like you should say, you didn't say anything. You just shook my hand and you stood next to me and said, I'm not letting you stand here on your own. And that's the message, boys, is mates, as Mr. Wallace talked about, are so important. But just being there for people, and don't worry too much about what you got to say. So, no expert in mental health, but if there was a message out there, just be around your friends. That's certainly a nice message to take out. I think we've got one more section in us, so we'll come back in a moment to finish off a little bit of words of wisdom from the living legend, Johnny Wallace. All right, we'll finish off with a little bit of words of wisdom from the living legend, Johnny Wallace. But on that note, what is the best advice you've ever received? A lot of people. What's something there, or a few things that have stuck in your mind, advice along the way?
Look, when you sort of think about that question, what is the best advice you can give to people? Number one, always be yourself. Always be yourself. Don't try and be someone you're not, because I can tell you what, everyone around you will pick it out. Particularly, I know the boys in this school, they know if someone's fake. You be yourself and be true to yourself. That's crucial. And I know myself that I don't care what people think, what I do or how I react, because I'm not doing anything wrong. It's me. You've got to be me. People love the real you. People love you. People love you because you're different. If you're a guy out there and you're trying to be like all your mates and dress the same and have the same haircuts and you want the same car, you got it all wrong. Got it all wrong. I really, really mean that. And be yourself. I really mean that. Some of the other best advice I got was from my beloved grandpop. My grandpop, who I used to love. I had a lot of time with my grandparents when I was a kid. I was very lucky. Spent a lot of time with them. And the other one is to respect women. Respect women. Be appreciative of what the role women have. And I remember that because my grandma had my mum had 7 sisters. And really respect women, because women can be the best friends. Not only is guys be your friend, but women can also be really great friends. And they've got very different to us. And of course, I remember my grandfather saying to me, he said, "Oh, I love your mum, I love your nana, I love her much." And my nana came back and said, "Yeah, I love you too because you're a real man. I love you." I can still remember that chemistry between them. And really respect your women, because like at TSS here, we've got a lot of women now in senior roles, and that's fantastic for the school. It's healthy. And I know the boys really respect the women in this school, whether they be housemasters, whether they be heads of department, or whether they be in the senior management like Miss Inglis. These women, they are great ladies. And when I first came here, boys, there were about 5 women on the staff. Now it's 50-50, or probably more if you include a lot of the lower education, particularly in the prep school. But be yourself, respect women. Also look after your body too. Look after your health. Your health is a priority. There are too many TSS boys. This is really interesting what I say here. When I did, as you know, I've been doing speech variety for a lot of the time, and boy, what I've heard from kids, you can imagine the things I've heard over 37 years. It was really amazing. In my early years here, boys used to talk about making a lot of money. I want to be wealthy. I want to get the hottest chick in town. All those sort of things. And I used to think, wow, you guys have got it all wrong. I said, they used to speak of things like that, and I used to think, wow. But the interesting thing is, in the last 5 years in speech variety, you don't hear that anymore. So this school is doing something really right. It's really expounding values. And what boys do now is when they get up and talk, they talk about gratitude, appreciation, how thankful they are, or what legacy can they leave behind the younger boys. I never heard those things 25 years ago. It was all about me, And I think to myself, wow, that is absolutely sensational. We are doing something right here. And people who've come to meetings even say that to me all the time. Wow, these guys, they really do have values. And the values have been amazingly far, far more mature and beneficial to the human mind and being, which they are. So that's crucial, is that your health is crucial. I look at myself and I say, I'm 68 years of age now. I'm really glad I'm healthy. I really mean that, because it's going to help my longevity. I want to enjoy my grandkids one day when they come. My 2 daughters in London, both my girls are not in Australia. My 2 girls are in London now. And my younger one's going very soon, but she'll be there, and that's why I hope I can see her next year, both the girls together. But I want to enjoy my kid. I want to enjoy my grandchildren, and I will do that. I don't want to be a burden on anyone. What really concerns me, and this is another thing in our society today, there are too many people that want to be a burden on someone else. And I grew up not to. I grew up to say, well, you make sure, John, you look after your finances when you're working, so you can, when you retire, do these things, which are really, really important. Don't become a burden on society. Be you, and that's what's important. And make sure that you look after yourself. That's a very, very important thing. I say that to boys, and that's why I always remember my grandma saying about Grandpa, I love him for being a man he is, because he had those values as well. So you look after your health. Health is the first thing. Money's irrelevant. It's important, but it's not as important. As far as health goes, there's no equation. Okay, it doesn't match. So look after your health. The other thing is make sure that you value the education you've had. Make sure all of you boys in this school, when you leave TSS, that you love your school, you've loved your school. And the school has done something. Have that value inside you. TSS boys, most of their mates, even in their 40s, 50s, are still TSS boys. That's what this school does. I haven't got time. I can tell you lots of stories of boys who tell me, he was my mate, I look after my mate. We happy few, we band of brothers, me. It's walk the talk here at TSS, very much so. So make sure you have values. Make sure you respect women. Make sure you be who you are and only you. Make sure you strive to do your best. In other words, when you actually leave school one day, make sure you strive to do your best. Don't become a bludger. Okay? Don't become a bludger. Keep working. And the big thing too is that I've done in life, and this is a real lesson, always remember you don't know everything. In fact, every year I keep saying more and more, gee, there's a hell of a lot I don't know. That's a great way to have. You know why? Because when you talk like that, you're prepared to keep learning. There are too many people who say things, I know it all. I know it. I don't have to. That's rubbish. Keep reinventing yourself too. Mr. Wallace has done that in his time. Keep reinventing yourself in what you do. Don't be too scared to try other pursuits, other challenges. Don't be too scared. As I said before, have a go. Have a go. Don't be scared of failure. That's a big thing too. Don't ever be scared of failure. If you miss out the first time, don't give up. Keep trying and keep trying and keep reinventing, keep improving yourself, and you'll get there in the end. Again, I could tell you heaps of stories about that. Now, when I first met our current headmaster in 2002, he was a resident master in Biddle House. Look where he is now. Why? Because he walked the talk I've just been talking about. Keep reinventing yourself, keep learning, keep reading, keep learning. All those sorts of things are crucial. That's a big thing I have to say. But the most important thing is be yourself. Be yourself and respect everyone around you, from the smallest human being to the largest. Always, boys, one of the things I've always done in this school, every boy, I have never confronted a boy. Never. I've never confronted a boy. I have never challenged a boy for what he believes. When I see other people try to do it, I pull them away and say, excuse me, he's got the right of free speech to say what he says. It could be very wrong, but that's how he feels now. And you've got to have that attitude. You've got to have that attitude to respect your fellow human being. Look, if I use currently, I love it when Daniel Final comes up and has a chat to me. I love it. He comes into the room. Mr. Wallace, how are you? I love that. That makes my day. It makes my day when that sort of thing happens. He is so honest, etc., and so genuine. And a lot of people will say, he's a real legend, that guy. And we've had lots of boys like him through the years, don't worry. I'm just using a current. I just think that boy, he believes in himself, etc., etc., etc. And the other thing is too, and I'll tell you, this is a very interesting thing about TSS that school can take great credit for. I was talking to a grandmother the other day at Royal Pines, and she was saying her grandson's here. And he's a bit different. He's in year 12, he's a bit different. And he's not really one, he has his moments, etc. But she said he loves it at this school. He absolutely loves TSS. And you know why? Because he's respected for who he is. He has friends here. He's respected. He is not ridiculed to be someone he isn't. And that's crucial. And that's why at schools like this, you're talking about staff, you're talking about school, diversity is crucial. You've got to learn how to get on with everyone. That's another thing. You've got to realise there are people out there you're not going to get on with, but you still try to. You still try to. Because we're all different. We're all very different. We all breathe the same air, okay? We all breathe the same air, but we're just so different. And the thing I've learnt is about how to be more tolerant. Be more tolerant of people who are different to you, and don't sort of think that your way is the only way. It's not at all. And the thing is, love each other too. Learn to love. And it's like I was saying to what I say a lot here is that I love the school, I love the boys, I love the staff I work with. And that term of love is crucial, to know what the word love means. Some of you got boys, you get different context of love. You have a different one. No, love is when you respect someone else, you love them being close to you, talking to you. That's what love is. And you miss them when they're not there. That's what love is. And love's a beautiful thing. And it's a very, very important thing of life. And if more people did love, it would be a lot better place to live, I can tell you. But I've loved this school. I really, really have. I've had 37 wonderful years here. And I tell you what, I remember the very day I arrived, I still remember I drove up in a Datsun stanza with a bogged out boot that the boys used to laugh about when I used to do swimming training. Great big hole in the boot. Used to bog it up. Used to always, of course, bog it, we go hole up again. Love the school, love the people I've met with, worked with, everything. Just loved it. And I wanted to love it. And the time comes when you've got to move on, but your heart's still here. Will always be here. And I've got so much time for the people I work with at this school and have worked with, those who are still with us and those who've gone. And you boys, you are special. You're the reason why we're here. And like the headmaster, Mr. Hawkins, knows that. Whenever he addresses, he said, you are the reason why we are at this school. Not us. We're here to guide you along. That's what our job is. You are the reason, and you'll always be the reason, are the boys. And that's why the greatest honour that's been given to me in this school is 5 valedictorian speeches. I've been asked to give 5 valedictorian speeches, and on 3 of those occasions I wasn't even teaching in Year 12. And it just showed me the effect you have on people as a teacher in this school right from the beginning. Does not necessarily mean being in Year 12. And a lot of boys, that's how they see, and they love you. I know you guys love your teachers, and that's great. And you're not too scared to say it. You're not too scared to hug now. You're not too scared to say to people, look, I love you, sir. That's fantastic. And I think that's what makes this school really great.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky, Johnny, and I can tell you that TSS loves you, and I hope the boys sit through this podcast long enough to hear your advice, because it's pretty special. But as Ernest Hemingway made things, he made them pretty simple. So
yes, that's right.
Be true to yourself, be who you are, love the women in your life.
My word.
Love yourself, keep yourself healthy.
My word.
That's really good advice. And
don't be scared of making mistakes. Go just jump about it, laugh about them. That's what it's all about.
You've reinvented yourself from a primary school teacher to one of our best secondary teachers in ancient history, which is can't be a slouch in that classroom. You've run our swimming program. One of the jobs I've always loved is watching you run that tug of war. So what a wonderful way to finish was give us one last take the strain. And we'll finish up with that.
I love this. Oh, dear. Yeah, okay, here we go. Houses, are you ready? Captain, you ready? Captain, are you ready? Take the rope. Give me pain. Take the strain. We got ourselves a tug of war.
What a wonderful way to finish. Johnny, thanks for spending time with us. I'll treasure these moments, and this will stay in our archives forever for all the TSS boys to listen to in the future. Living legend, Johnny Wallace. Thanks, mate.
Thank you, mate. Pleasure.